Um, I'm sorry, guys. I do the amplified. Let me say yes to the recording real quick. Sorry. Hold
Okay, I'm gonna go
on.
there too.
I ain't even gonna do this to myself. I got a whole nother phone. Let me use this one so I ain't gotta keep going back and forth. 1 second, guys. Sorry. I gotta get better with writing stuff down because if we would have made it to Exodus 4 last week, I had some stuff. So God, bring it back to my mind, please. Okay, I'm there. Moses, Moses given powers. Then Moses answered the Lord and said, "What if they will not believe me or take seriously what I say? For they may say, the Lord has not appeared to you." And the Lord said to him, what is that in your hand? And he said, "A staff." Then he said, "Throw it on the ground." So Moses threw it on the ground, and it became a serpent, like the royal symbol on the crown of Pharaoh. And Moses ran from it. 4. But the Lord said to Moses, "Reach out your hand and grasp it by the tail." So he reached out his hand and caught it, and it became a staff in his hand. "You shall do this," said the Lord, "so that the elders may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has most certainly appeared to you." 6. The Lord also said to him, "Put your hand into your robe, where it covers your chest." So he put his hand into his robe, and when he took it out, his hand was leprous, as white as snow. Then God said, "Put your hand into your robe again." So he put his hand back into his robe, and when he took it out, it was restored, as was like the rest of his body. If they will not believe you or pay attention to the evidence of the first sign, they may believe the evidence of the second sign. 9. But if they will not believe these two signs or pay attention to what you say, you are to take some water from the Nile and pour it on the dry ground, and the water which you take out of the river will turn into blood on the dry ground. 10.
Okay, let's stop there. Let's stop there.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, y'all got any commentaries between 1 through 10? 1 through 9, I'm sorry, 1 through 9.
How patient he is, because look, your mom gonna say, "You gonna go do what I say." That's end all be all, right? But look how patient he is. He's like, "Okay, here, let me show you." It's almost like Moses was even doubting it a little bit. To me, that's how I feel. You know what I mean? So because I felt like if he truly believed, he would never question God. Like, what if they don't, or what if they don't? Just like we do as humans, we do it
Mhm.
all the time. So yeah, that's the only thing I had for that part. Sorry.
Hallelujah. I agree. Anybody else got any comments? Commentary?
The significance of leprosy
Mhm.
and his rod, his staff that he had. And I lost my notes. I'm like Nadine. I had my notes like when we first started talking about it. God help me. What I can remember from my notes is that each one of the miracles that was performed was a direct challenge and a show of power of God over a particular God that the Egyptian people worshiped. Now, the name of the gods, I have to find it. But I know that every miracle was a direct show of power of God to these so-called little g gods, right? And that his rod help me out. The rod attributed to power. The rod was like power. His rod was power. And so when he had the rod and it stood as a rod, it was power. But when he cast it down to be a serpent and then picked it back up again, it was like the rod of God. So it was like, it represents, again, power. But when it was down, because when it cast down, I think, did it not eat up all the other snakes or rods that had been turned to snakes?
I think that was later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Leprosy. And I'm doing this from memory, y'all. Bear with me. He had to put his hand in his heart. That was like his bosom. So it was a sign of preparation for service. And I just want to say, when he took his hand out and his hand was white and it freaked him out, if he was already white, why would a leper's hand freak him out? Okay, that was just a side note.
Say it again.
If I'm already white and I put my hand in my bosom and I pull it out and it's white, I'm not going to freak out about it because I'm already white. But if I'm black and I pull my hand out and now my hand is white, oh yeah, I'm freaking out. So that attests to the sign that he was not a white man. Again, it's consecration and preparation for service. That's the reason he told him to put his hand in his bosom. In King James, it says, put it in your bosom. And that's where your heart is. And so he was preparing him, I think, for service, like creating a new heart. Because your hand, you serve with your hand, obviously, like you do the work with your hand, but you have to have a new heart to do that. And so by putting his service hand on his heart, that was like an indication, like, okay, you were operating through your faith. With a new heart. So, we have to be cleansed. Our hands have to be cleansed. Our heart has to be cleansed. I think that's where I'm at. I'm gonna look for these notes, but that was some of my thought.
Hallelujah. That was good, Elder, with the heart part, because I missed that part, but I think it goes back with what I did have. So that comes together good. I appreciate that. Thank you. So just I wanted to go back to the top. Just going back to like the fact that like Sister Nadine was talking about the excuses, the patience of God, because Moses has so many excuses. If we remember last chapter, Moses was saying, he was talking about he said, who am I? Like, God, I can't go. Who am I that you could send me? So we see Moses say, talk about, he was relying on himself. He was relying on his own self-confidence and his ability and not relying on God. And I believe that that's what Sister Nadine was saying too. And then the next thing he says, the next excuse he comes up with, he says, who should I tell them that sent me? Because they won't believe. So, it was like the fear of rejection. Like, but if I go to them and I tell them that the Lord said, they're not going to believe that you sent me. So it was like that fear of rejection, right? And remember, we got to remember Moses' experience, because remember, Moses was already rejected when he called himself trying to save his fellow Israelite, and he killed the Egyptian at the, that was at the hands of the Egyptian. He killed that Egyptian. And then remember, they're like, who called you and told you that you were a prince over us or ruler over us? So he was already rejected and he fled, right? He fled off to Midian, and he's been in Midian for the last 40 years. And he got married there and has children there. And he's just, he's a shepherd now, right? He's a shepherd for his father-in-law, Jethro, remember? So like, he's just living a pretty chillax life, you know, everyday life. I got the wife, the kids, I get up, I go to work, tend these flock every day, you know, that's pretty much what he's doing. And so now he's kind of like, what, send me, you know? And then the next excuse he comes up with, he's like, what if they don't believe or listen to the message? What if I tell them, but they don't believe what I'm saying? So he just keeps coming with these excuses, right? And that's where the patience is coming in of God that Sister Nadine is talking about. But even in that, let's look at God's response on verse 2. God says, and the Lord said to him, what is that in your hand? And he said, a staff. So God says, what is that in your hand? And I thought that was powerful. And it was the first time that it really actually stuck out to me because think about it. Like Elder said, now God already knows what's in his hand. God already knows what Moses holds and possesses. God already knows. But it was kind of like, but he asked him as like, do you know what you got in your hand? And Moses says, yeah, it's a staff. And then God tells him what to do with it. So it's like, what is it that you have in your hand? God is saying, like, I've already equipped you. Those who are called, I have equipped. You already have everything you need. You have everything you need. So your time that you've been spending the last 40 years in as a shepherd was not in vain. That was me equipping you the whole time. So he's telling Moses to use what he has. And I thought that was powerful because a lot of times, you know, we're waiting for God to give us something new. We're waiting for him to add to something else, give us something else, give us an extra tool. But God is like, what do you have in your hand? You know, your time is not in vain and you're already equipped because I called you before the foundations of the earth. So Moses, he's making Moses realize that what he already has is already what God is going to call him to use, right? So like Elder was explaining the staff, the shepherd's staff. And as he tells him to throw it on the ground, you know, he says, throw it on the ground, and it became a living serpent. And I do believe that the serpent, it says like the royal symbol on the Amplified version, it says like the royal symbol on the crown of Pharaoh. So, you know, back in the day, the Egyptians wore those crowns that had the serpents or whatever on the, you know, on the crown, on the headpiece of it, the headband, and they would have it on their jewelry and stuff, on their arms and stuff. So the serpent, you know, represented the Egyptian culture. It represented their deity, you know, the deity of Pharaoh, and it represented the power of Pharaoh. So like Elder was saying, you know, because this is a war against the gods, and sometimes we might look at it like, oh, this is Moses against Pharaoh, but this is actually a war against the kingdom of God and the kingdom of darkness, right? It's always spiritual. It's always a war against the gods, right? So this serpent, so as Moses throws the serpent down, he's throwing down the staff that he already had, the staff of God that God had already prepared him, placed in his hand, empowered him with, and he throws it down and it turns into a snake. And again, the snake representing Egypt, representing specifically Pharaoh's deity and Pharaoh's power. Then he tells, and then of course, human nature, Moses is scared and he runs from it. But then God tells him, he says, grab the serpent by the tail. And think about it. You never grab a snake by its tail, right? Because then it would have the ability to like circle around and come up and bite you with the head. So you would always, people who would grab it, I would never grab a snake, period. But you know, people who do grab a snake, they would always grab it by its head, right? So they can control it. So it wouldn't have the ability to bite them. But he tells Moses to grab it by its tail. And I believe he told him that as a, like how Elder was saying, a display of the power that Moses would have over Pharaoh, over Egypt, right? That he can't bite you, he can't harm you. You know, the Bible says you'll take up serpents with your bare hands. And that's what it reminds me of, right? And so, so again, the miracles that we're seeing here are not just miracles just for the sake of doing magic, because again, God is not just a magician. Like he displays his power, and he performs the miracles as signs, so that way people would believe and they have purpose in them. They're not just to say, hey, I can do magic tricks. So each thing has a purpose, right? And so when we go down and we begin to look at the leprosy one, like Elder was saying, the leprosy had purpose, right? Leprosy was a skin disease, and it was considered to be very unclean. The Hebrews, they knew, like, when someone had leprosy, they were sent outside of the camp. They couldn't even be in the camp, y'all. They had to go outside of the camp, and they were considered unclean. So I believe too that the leprosy is a symbol of uncleanliness. And like Elder was saying, the part that I didn't catch, like Elder was saying, when Moses had to stick his hand in his bosom, symbolizing his heart, because we have unclean hearts, right? And so, it was symbolizing, but then when he pulled it out, he was showing that, God has the power to change them from unclean to clean, right? Because that's part of this deliverance process, right? He's going to pull them out of Egypt, out of the hands of Pharaoh, out of this uncleanly culture and out of this uncleanliness, and set them apart and bring them back to himself and clean them up. So that was part of the salvation and the deliverance of being called out of Egypt, is to go from unclean to clean. And I believe that that was what it was, and more specifically, the heart, because we know God doesn't, the outer appearance is not what's as important to God, but it's the inside, right? Because remember, he said, I'm making you a clean heart. And we talked about the heart transplant and all that stuff. So when I look at the first miracle about the staff and the snake, I see, the God showing his power and authority, right? And then the second miracle, I see the deliverance and the salvation. That's what I see. And then on the last miracle, I see, the water to blood. So he takes the water. And on this particular one, he only takes a sample, a little bit of the water, and he throws it on the ground, and then the water becomes blood. But then later on, we see the whole entire, later on in Exodus, as they're getting ready to, as God is passing the judgments, we see the whole entire river turn to blood. And then we see the whole body of water turn to blood in Revelation as well. But we see it as a form of judgment. So I believe that is what's the word I'm looking for? Like the order of events as it happens. Like, first God is coming, and he's going to he's coming with great power and glory and display his power. And he's coming with deliverance to pull us out and deliver us. And then he's coming with his judgment. So that's how I see it, y'all, is that last one, turning that water to blood, he's only turning a piece of it. So it's like a little bit of the water. So that was like a foreshadowing. It was just like a warning of showing his judgment. And it's also not a coincidence to me, and y'all help me out with this, but this is how I'm looking at it. Remember, Moses is the one who was supposed to be killed and thrown into the Nile River, right? And like Elder was saying too, because now think about the Nile, because the Nile is a major body of water. Like this is their supply, this is their source of everything, their transportation, their trade, their food supply, everything is coming from the Nile. And they have so many gods and goddesses that they believe that are controlling the water and so on and so forth, and they're getting from whatever. So the fact that God would come, and I think it's no coincidence that Moses is the one who was supposed to die in that water, but he's standing before Pharaoh with this miracle, and he's turning that same water that was supposed to kill him into the judgment of God. And, it says in Revelations, it talks about how, they will drink. What does it say? They will drink blood. He says, I will give them blood to drink. He turns the water to blood, and he says, I will give them blood to drink. So it's like, y'all understand what I'm saying? The correlation I'm trying to make here. Help me out, y'all. Help me, because I don't have the words to say it how I'm trying to say it, but I hope y'all get what I'm saying.
I love that analogy about the heart. That's actually the first time I've heard that. So the unclean heart. And that's exactly what it is. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I had just looked at it as clean and unclean, but when Elder gave us that more specific detail, that even makes it all to the more like, wow, God, hallelujah. And then it's so beautiful here, y'all, because like it's all just pointing back to Christ. Like Erica always says, like Christ is right here in this. It's so good, but we'll get into that more. I don't want to get too ahead. But anyway, what do y'all have? Y'all got any comments before we go to 10? Elder, did you need to add anything?
That's good, sis. I think you summed it up well.
Okay, Sister Nadine or Erica, did y'all want to pick up on 10?
Okay. Verse 10. Then Moses said to the Lord, Please, Lord, I am not a man of words, neither before nor you have spoken to your servant, for I am slow of speech and tongue. Excuse number, I don't even know at this point. The Lord said to him, Who has made man's mouth? Or who makes the mute, or the deaf, or the seeing, or the blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now, now then go, and I, even I, will be with you. Sorry. Okay, wait a minute. I lost my space. Okay. Sorry. Even I will be with your mouth and will teach you what you shall say. 13. But he said, Please, my Lord, send the message of rescue to Israel by someone else, whomever else you will choose. I'm gonna just keep going.
Did you have any comments on any of that, Nadine?
No, just the one I made. One more excuse.
Did y'all have any comments on any up to 13 yet?
That's what I was gonna say. Like, I mean, it's even today, it's like it could be an excuse or even fear. He feels like his speech or his tongue is not better than someone else's. Like I don't know if this is a good example, but for instance, like somebody in a higher education or a higher degree that can speak um these articulate words, these words you probably haven't even heard before. You'd be like, what the world do those mean? But and then here you over here, you just speaking as what we call, I guess, simple talk or whatever. So now, I mean, in true, like Sister Nadine said, an excuse. And I feel like, fear set in or whatnot. But I like how God is just trying to remind him, even though he still is that way, he's trying to remind him, basically, I'm the one that gives, everyone the ability to do what they need to do, whether blind, deaf, mute, you know. Um, so, and then he told him that he would teach him, but here again, uh, Moses is still basically allowing that fear to rise up and and not have confidence in himself. But it seemed like Christ had confidence in him.
Such a real thing too. And like I said, I do it in everyday life, so I already know what Quinn say. And then you can do your testimony. And I made every excuse in the book not to do it. So, and y'all ain't murderers and people that hate me. So Imagine God asked me to speak to them. Lord Jesus.
But you know what? Just like Evangelist said, who God calls, he equips and he justifies. By Moses being that shepherd that he was doing for that 40 years, God already knew what he had prepared him to do. And that's just like with David, because David was the shepherd and he was preparing him, just like with Joseph when he was taken into slavery. So, and that's the same thing with us. That's why I think when we give our testimonies and we have the opportunity to think about what God has brought us through, when we look back on it, we can see what God has prepared us for. You know, so just look back. I mean, you know, come out of your self-limiting beliefs. That's what I always call it. And look at how God moved and gave you the strength to overcome. Like some of y'all's testimonies was, you know, just sheer strength. And that strength came from Christ. And so that's the same way he's ministering to Moses here is how he ministers to us. When we say, God, I can't do that, or I don't know if they'll look at me, or I can't say that, or whatever it is, that excuse that we give, but God has already prepared us. And that's our testimony. And that's why, Sister Nadine, we need to give our testimony so that we can reflect and see exactly what it is God has prepared us for. Amen.
And it shows me too, like in those verses that Sister Nadine spoke, and I'm pretty sure we can all attest to this as well. It's like Moses was in his own way. Like he couldn't get out of his own way of what he was looking at, what he can't do and what he couldn't do. And then it just makes me think about that saying that people use. It's like we're our own worst enemy. Is that what they say or something? But that's what that makes me think about. His focus was so much on not having the speech and the tongue more than on Christ, the one who gave him that speech and tongue, the one that can speak through him and for him. It wouldn't even be himself. It's kind of making me think about how Sister Sean came on today and was saying about how this the Holy Spirit, just started, speaking and taking over through her in tongue. However, she, like Elder Marie said, she was saying that she could understand it, basically, if that makes sense. I know I went around into different examples, but I just feel like we can be in our own way, and instead of, focusing on Christ, is like how God was saying, I don't know if we got to this part yet, and I'm not trying to skip, but when he took that serpent, that pole, and he was telling the people to focus on that pole and they wouldn't be bitten or something like that. It's like we got to take the focus off of ourselves and again put it back on Christ.
Hallelujah. I agree with you 100%, because think about it. Who would really just bend down and just grab that snake by the tail without being scared? But at that moment, he was trusting God. He knew who God was. God was right there with him. He told him to do it. So he trusted him. So it's about the ability of God, the great I am, the I am. We talked about that last week. Hallelujah. And I think it's powerful too, just in the part where it talks about Nadine said, like, it's so many, here he goes with another excuse. He's talking about his speech. And like you guys are all saying, like, we're all in our own way sometimes. We come up with all these excuses. And God says, and he says, the Lord said to him, who has made man's mouth, or who makes the mute or the deaf or the seeing or the blind? Is it not I, the Lord? So even in our weaknesses, God is saying, like, I'm the one who, so it's just like even still trusting it. And even in that, he wants to be able to use our weaknesses so that his glory may be known. You know what I mean? It's the one who you would never think could come out and speak. It's the one who was just acting up crazy and rebellious that's out there standing on the corner, bringing souls to Christ. It's the least expected. It's the one who you might think could never do it. You get what I'm saying? Like he says, he'll use the foolish to confound the wise. Like, it's just the ones you least expect. And that's how they're like, not Sister Gwen, the one who was doing XYZ, 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 not Sister Nadine. You know what I mean? So it's just like, so that's how his power and his glory is made known, that he was able to transform a drunkard, transform a prostitute, transform a crackhead. Y'all get my point. You know what I mean? So it's just like, we have to remember that, you know what I mean? Like those are the ones he wants to use. All right, y'all got anything else before we go to 14? I just got a question for y'all. Just what do y'all think about the fact that, because I'm not sure, like the fact that, do you feel like God compromised with Moses and said, okay, here, then you can let Aaron, your brother, go with you? Like, do you, because I see some people use the word compromise, but I'm not sure. Like, what do y'all think about that? You know what I mean? Like, what do y'all think?
I don't think I. Oh, go ahead, Ms. Elder.
Sorry. Go ahead, Sister Erica.
Oh, it's okay. No, I was just gonna say I had never looked at it like that, and I didn't realize that like Sister Gwen was saying, that people do realize it like that. Right now I'm looking at it like how he had that ram in the bush, if that makes sense. Like okay, so you feel like you can't do it. I don't even feel like, well, okay, it did say God was angry. Okay, boom, bam, and pow. However, I just feel like he's like, okay, you can't do it. I'll bring somebody else up that's willing and that will. Not even that he can, because you can too. He's just more willing. So here I go. I got this ram, so I'm gonna bring him to the forefront. That's how I look at it.
God, remember, he is full of grace, and sometimes he'll always, again, because he knows our hearts, he will look, I'm sure he looked at Moses' heart and saw the genuine concern that Moses had, because he was so slow of speech. Some say he stuttered, and just think about, just bringing it back to our time, just thinking about all these mega preachers. Now, just imagine if one of them had a stutter, so God also, he looked at Moses and had grace on him, but he also looked at the hearts of the Israelites and knew that they were not patient people. They were not gracious people. They were not, they already gave Moses a hard time. So they'd be like, get out of here with your stuttering self. Like, they really would have just gave him hell. So God sent somebody who he knew was a great orator, we'll say it that way, who could hold people's attention and who would be able to speak. So if you look at it, he made Moses the priest and he made Aaron his prophet.
Nice. Amen.
Hallelujah. Yeah, I just wanted to know you guys' take, because I see a lot of people look at it like as in God compromising with Moses, and I didn't really know how to take that, because it wasn't resonating with me like that. So I just didn't know. So I appreciate those perspectives. I couldn't put it in my mind together. So I appreciate that. Thank you guys. All right, y'all ready to go to 14?
Sister Erica, can you read for a bit?
Oh, yes, I got you. Okay. All right, verse 14. Then the anger of the Lord was kindled and burned against Moses. He said, "Is there not your brother Aaron the Levite? I know that he speaks fluently. Also, he is coming out to meet you, and when he sees you, he will be overjoyed." Verse 15. You must speak to him and put the words in his mouth. I, even I, will be with your mouth and with his mouth, and I will teach you what you are to do. Verse 16. Moreover, he shall speak for you to the people. He will act as a mouthpiece for you, and you will be as God to him, telling him what I say to you. Verse 17. You shall take in your hand this staff with which you shall perform the signs, the miracles which prove I sent you. Verse 18. Then Moses went away and returned to Jethro, his father-in-law, and said to him, "Please let me go back so that I may return to my relatives in Egypt and see if they are still alive." And Jethro said to Moses, "Go in peace." Verse 19. Then the Lord said to Moses in Midian, "Go back to Egypt, for all the men who were seeking your life for killing the Egyptian are dead." Verse 20. So Moses took his wife Zipporah and his son. I know that's your name. It isn't here. Sorry, y'all. My other daughter, the youngest, is Zipporah. And his son Gershom and Elijah, and seated them on donkeys and returned to the land of Egypt. Moses also took the staff of God in his hand. Verse 21. The Lord said to Moses, "When you return to Egypt, see that you perform before Pharaoh all the wonders, miracles, which I have put in your hand. But I will harden his heart and make him stubborn so that he will not let the people go." Verse 22. Then you shall say to Pharaoh, "Thus says the Lord, Israel is my son, my firstborn." 23. So I say to you, let my son go so that he may serve me. And if you refuse to let him go, behold, I will kill your son, your firstborn. Verse 24. Now it happened at the lodging place that the Lord met Moses and sought to kill him, making him deathly ill because he had not circumcised one of his sons. 25. Then Zipporah took a flint knife and cut off the foreskin of her son and threw it at Moses' feet and said, "Indeed, you are a husband of blood to me." Verse 26. So he let Moses alone to recover. At that time, Zipporah said, "You are a husband of blood because of the circumcision."
So let's stop right there, please. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Did you have any comments, Erica?
I was gonna go back. Um, I just like how, Elder was saying, and how I was talking about basically, like she said, how God is, grace and is caring. He provided Aaron for him to speak. Um, but then he still like he didn't leave Moses out. He still had Moses basically um like he said, being God, but he was telling Moses what he wanted to be said, and then Moses were related to Aaron, if that makes sense. But then I'm trying to go, okay, and 15, I just like how this was so awesome. I believe this is it say you must speak to him and put the words in his mouth. I will be, he was saying, I will be with your mouth and with his mouth, and I will teach you what you are to do. So in all of that, God is still the teacher and the mouthpiece for them both. They're just instruments or vessels that he used to speak to his people, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does make sense. Thank you. Anybody else got any comments?
Yeah, the fact that God was going to kill Moses. Moses grew up and the Egyptians were circumcising their children, following after they say following after their God, but they were really following after the Hebrews. And so Moses did not circumcise his sons because he saw it as an Egyptian tradition and not as a Hebraic tradition. And so we know that the circumcising of the son was a covenant between God and his people. And so Moses had broke covenant by not circumcising his sons. And so with that, God was going to kill him. But his wife stepped in and circumcised the boy and threw the circumcision, the cut, at Moses's feet. And that sacrifice was what saved him from being killed right then and there, because then the covenant had been established by his wife's actions, because he was out of alignment with what he was supposed to be doing as a Hebrew.
Now, Elder, did I miss that somewhere? Like, did God tell him to do it and he ignored it?
No,
Or God,
it was a tradition. It was a covenant that was established between God and the Hebrews.
right? But did he like? So I'm just trying to figure out where Moses messed up,
Because
other than him thinking it's Hebrew. What did you say? Egyptian thing?
he didn't circumcise his son, so he broke covenant. He was out of covenant with God. Because the covenant was established back with Abraham. So it was an Abrahamic covenant that was established that on the 8th day you were to circumcise your male children. And he knew that, because even though he grew up Egyptian, he knew the customs of his family, of the Hebrews, but he did not do what he was supposed to do. He was out of line. He was out of covenant. So God was going to, he was going to kill him for it.
I think it just throws me off a little bit. Like, okay, I want you to do this mission, and then I got mad at you that night. That's what it seems like. Now there might have been all this time in between. You know what I mean? But I don't know. It threw me off. So thank you for explaining.
So you're saying that his wife saved the day, like we always do?
basically, sis.
Because that's what I got out of it. We always gotta, do what we need to do to save our family. So, how old was this son? Was he grown when he got circumcised? Or is it no mention of age?
It doesn't mention of age, but I don't think he was a big boy. I don't think he was grown. I don't think he was grown. I don't think he was like a teenager or nothing like that. I think they were young.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Because I'm like, whoa, that's something.
Can you imagine your mom waking you up and doing that grown? So I hope he wasn't.
No, the practice of circumcision today is not something that we're biblically obligated to do. Is that correct? It's just um more so symbolization, and we're supposed to really be circumcised in our heart is like what my understanding is. Okay, Evangelist is shaking her head.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because I was just wondering because I mean my son is circumcised, and I always knew that that was part of the covenant between God and Abraham, and even though it's not required, it still feels like a reminder, kind of like the rainbow, right? Like one of God's promises. Um, and then recently I was at the hospital doing a hospital tour, for the birth. And I was the only mom that had a girl. All the rest of the moms had boys. And one of the nurses was like, are you guys planning to do circumcisions? Like, we had one around and everybody's like, yeah, boy, 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 boy. Um, and everybody, there was probably about 5 or 6 people, and they are all like, no. Which surprised me because I didn't know that so many people weren't circumcising their children now. And um, because that is kind of like originally started with the covenant between God and Abraham, I was just thinking like maybe there's something more spiritually connected to that, to the reason why, maybe Satan has people's minds, turned away, that even though it's not a requirement, but it's just something, one more thing that he's like, okay, you guys ain't gonna do that no more. Because I always knew that like a lot of like the Caribbean people that believe in, especially Haitians and Cubans, especially that don't have um, that belief in Jesus, they usually never have circumcised their children. So it's just shocking that here in the US that's just something that, I mean, I know everybody, all the guys like my age and, older, that's always something that you always did. And now these children, generation Z maybe, nobody's circumcising.
You were on point with um, Satan hardening the hearts of these people, and even for it not being necessary, just for sanitary reasons, because an uncircumcised penis is disgusting. Um, yeah, and you're right, sis, with the whole Satan is ministering to these people. People remember God said he's going to turn them over to themselves. And so he's kind of doing that. And so many people are spiritual and following after the ways of the world. So yeah, it is Satan ministering to the hearts and minds of people. And again, it's just gross and disgusting. And I hope that before these little boys become grown men, that they can have that done. And it's just for nothing else, just for sanitary reasons. Ugh.
I was gonna say that too, because that is gross. I mean, us in the medical field, we know that a lot of bacterial and stuff like that um, is can get on those uncircumcised, foreskins. It's just real nasty. But me working in it too, just like Sister Sean said, I don't know. I guess they call them Generation Z. I don't know what this generation is called, but um, a lot of them are scared to get it done at that age because they think it's babies. They think a lot of stuff hurt them, which of course we know it's going to be, uncomfortable or what have you. But I mean, we know this from medical, and whoever's not even in medical, you know, you hear your doctor say it's better to get it while they're young. Whatever they need is better to get it while they're young, because when they're older, a lot of them want to wait until they're older, and oh my Lord, it's just so much harder on them when they do get it. I've even known I think a couple of grown men that said they got it when they were adults, and it's rough. It's definitely rough. Working in the medical field with this generation made me question my parenting a lot. It really has. They don't want their babies to cry. They don't. Everything hurts them. Um, their baby fall on, just fall or whatnot. Which you got to be cautious because these parents aren't nurses or doctors or whatnot. But I remember when I worked in the emergency room, just seeing all these parents come in because their babies fell, hit their head. It may not be hard, but they want to be cautious. I questioned myself like I was a bad parent because my daughter, shoot, I had her on my chest, putting her to sleep, thinking I won't gonna fall asleep, and all of a sudden, boom, face down. I didn't take her to the hospital or nothing. But I mean, like I said, I don't know. I guess it's just they want to wait till they get older, thinking it'll help. I guess I'm not sure.
I think it's more about letting them make their own decisions. That's that new thing. Everybody gets to make their own decisions about their body.
That's true. That's true. Yep.
I don't like it because I work in a baby room and these kids come in there spoiled, rotten. I never understood if you're going to send your child to daycare and you're breastfeeding, you have to introduce the bottle because, of course, I can't give nothing but powder milk out of my boob. So I don't like it. I don't like that they don't feed these babies either. We fed our babies, some cereal. These parents don't do nothing that I would normally do with my kids. And I just be looking at them like, y'all don't understand. Y'all is, jacking these kids up.
Sister
That's
Nikki,
because grandma's
I can
28 years
attest
old.
to that.
Oh,
I'm
I'm sorry.
sorry. I'm sorry. I
That's because
can just say
grandma's
I
so
can
young.
attest to that. I'm watching my grandbaby, and they got this baby on us every 4 hours, and he's only allowed 4 ounces. And this baby, and I'm like, what? She
Yes,
breastfeeding.
yes,
Yeah, she's
yes.
breastfeeding, and she does both. She does like 2 ounces of breast milk and 2 ounces of the formula, according to the doctor. That's what she was supposed to be doing. I'm like, okay, whatever. So what I said, when I go shopping this weekend, I'm gonna buy that formula. And y'all go ahead with that every 4 hours, 4 ounces, because that baby get ready to get some weight and he get ready to get some food. Cause my mom get ready to take care of him.
Yeah, because I don't understand that. And the babies be screaming.
Yeah, they
I'd be like, I
hungry.
know these babies is hungry. I know they're hungry. We like one baby, his times are 10. He's at 10 a.m., 1:30, and 5. There's no way. He be screaming, screaming. And he just turned 6 months. So now they're giving him food.
I'm
So
sorry,
I'm
six
like,
months and he's still getting fed 3 times out the bottle.
yes,
Mm-mm.
yes, yes. I can't take it. I be sitting there like, if I knew this kid wouldn't have a reaction to something I gave him, I would have been gave him something. Because it's like you can't even console these kids. Then this one mom, she was like, well, her son's 6 months. She sends in one milk bottle and like 3 juice bottles. Honey, they get their nutrients from the milk, not the juice. I be wondering like, who is y'all doctors, Dr. Kevorkian? Because I don't understand.
And you can't tell them nothing.
Absolutely not. I had to tell him my son would have been 32 years old this July, and I got 3 other kids and 2 grandbabies. Ain't none of them ever had nothing. I fed each and every one of them. and the twins was born 2 months early. So I had some NICU babies, and I made sure I fed them because they were so small. I'm like, y'all handling these babies like they're, you know, tea in China, like you do China cups. No, 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 no. Then we got this one baby, and I'm gonna be off of this because this is crazy. They got this backpack, y'all, for when the baby fall backwards, it has cushion. It covers the head and stuff. When he came in there with that, I said he's gonna be getting attacked because all the other kids, it's a cat. So all the other kids is looking at it and it's bright yellow. So they attack him. So he fall anyway. And I say, well, what if he fall face forward? That's not stopping nothing.
See, see, but I got again, these grandmas ain't in the mix. I told one of my coworkers a couple years ago, baby corn spam. I'm like, put some K rose syrup in there. Oh, what? I said, yeah, it says put some K rose. You need a black grandma. Is what you need. But she listened to me and she did it, and she was so excited. She was so excited that it actually worked. I told her to get the baby some farina because that's what my Gigi told me to get some farina. She's like, you can't do rice cereal if there's allergic reaction. I said, well, get farina. Girl, she take me forever. That baby actually slept.
Wow. Wow. All right, y'all. What verse? I think we stopped at 27. Okay, yeah, because we stopped right after the circumcision. So we could pick up next week on 27. Let's just finish the ones that we did real quick, just going back to verse 19. So hopefully next week we can do 27 to the end, and then we can do chapter 5. So that's where we're at next week. But on 19, we already read 19, and just let's look at 19 real quick. 19 says, then the Lord said to Moses and Midian, go back to Egypt, for all the men who were seeking your life for killing the Egyptian are dead. And so that stuck out to me because, again, as we look into the life of Moses and Jesus, we see the parallels and we see the comparisons. And I remember that is what God had spoke to Joseph in regard to Jesus's life. Because remember, we said that, remember when Moses was born and both when Jesus was born, they were killing the baby boys, right? And Jesus's parents had to take him into Egypt. He had to flee into Egypt and be hid in Egypt, right? And then Moses had to be hidden. Moses was already in Egypt, but Moses had to be hidden, right? So he wouldn't be killed, right? And then now, so now God is telling Moses to go back into Egypt, right? And he's telling him all the people who wanted to kill you then, are gone. They're dead. So don't worry. Your life is not in danger. And he told Joseph, Jesus's father, natural father, the same thing. When in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 2, verse 20, he says, get up. The angel said, take the child and his mother back to the land of Israel, because those who were trying to kill the child are dead. So I just wanted to mention that because, again, we're seeing the comparisons, the parallel of the life of Jesus and Moses. And I thought that was important and interesting to just point out. And then let's skip down to verse 22 really quickly. Out of Egypt, it says, verse 22 says, then you shall say to Pharaoh, thus says the Lord, Israel is my son, my firstborn. That's what he said. So now look how the father is calling Israel his son, his firstborn son. Does anybody want to elaborate on why God would call Israel his son?
Is it because it's, I don't know, one of the First Nations? I don't know.
Right.
That's what I would think because it's one of the first, and I don't know. That's my guess.
And because it goes back down to the circumcision, God is a God of covenant. He was in covenant with them, a God of promise. And so that's why God has promised to save his people. And he's sending in Moses, to go in and save his people, right? If we look at And, you know, the circumcision was the sign, was the outward mark on their bodies of the sign of that covenant. So if you didn't have that cut on your body, you were not in covenant, because then remember, it was a physical sign. Now we know it's a spiritual circumcision of the heart. But remember, remember we talked about it when we talked about guarding our heart. Remember, we talked about how the circumcision there of cutting away the flesh from the foreskin was cutting away the flesh, right? And but it was foreshadowing the circumcision that we're to have today, of cutting away our flesh and not walking after the flesh, not lusting after the flesh, but walking after the spirit, right? So it's a heart thing, right? So but that is now the physical sign of the covenant now, right? We have to still have that same mark on our hearts in order to be in covenant, right? And so yeah, God calls Israel his covenant people, because those are the people whom he chose, you know, to be in covenant with him, to be in relationship with him. Those are the ones whom he revealed himself to, who he revealed his glory to, who he made this covenant relationship and promise with, right? So these are his people. And if we look at Hosea, real quick, Hosea 11:1, it says, now Hosea is a prophet. This was written after Exodus, but it was written before Jesus. Okay. So he says, so the prophet Hosea is prophesying, and he says, when Israel, it says the Lord's love for Israel. And we're not talking about Israel as in the physical place right here. We're talking about Israel as in the nation, the group of people, right? And it says, when Israel was a child, I loved him, and I called my son out of Egypt. But the more I called to him, the further he moved from me, offering sacrifices to the images of Baal and burning incense to idols. I myself taught Israel how to walk, leading him along by the hand, but he doesn't know or even care. But it was I who took care of him. I led Israel along with my ropes of kindness and love. I lifted the yoke from his neck, and I myself stooped to feed him. But since my people refused to return to me, they will return to Egypt and will be forced to serve Assyria. I'm gonna stop right there. But you see the nurturing, you see that father, that parenting, that nurturing that God is displaying in this prophecy of Israel. But the part that I wanted us to catch, but then Israel's rebellion, right? Rebelling, serving other gods, so on and so forth. But the point that I wanted us to catch there was where it says, when Israel was a child, I loved him, and I called my son out of Egypt. So we see here how Israel is being delivered out of Egypt by the hand of God through Moses, right? So Israel's being called out of Egypt, called out of that bondage, right? But then we look at Matthew 2:15 and look at and where it says, Matthew 2:15, it says, and I'm gonna stop right here, y'all, this ain't long. 2:15, it says, that night, Joseph left for Egypt. Now I'm going back to the gospel, Matthew. This is at the time of, after the birth of Jesus. That's where I'm at right now. It says that night, Joseph, that's Jesus' father, left for Egypt with the child and Mary, his mother, and they stayed there until Herod's death. This fulfilled what the Lord had spoken through the prophet. I called my son out of Egypt. So Jesus' life is what's the word I'm looking for, y'all? Is the embodiment, the fulfillment of that calling out of Egypt, right? Jesus is that perfect, without spot or blemish. What's the word, y'all? Help me. But you see the parallel and the reflection of Jesus's life, right? Being called out of Egypt the same way that his son, he's referring to his son, the Israel, the people being called out of Egypt. But Jesus is the fulfillment of that, right? He is help me out, y'all. Help me explain it.
Is it
He's
like
the
a shadow of
prize.
his? Go ahead.
I was gonna say he's like a prize. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm trying to explain it the best I can. That's a good word. That's a good word. What were you going to say, Sister Erica?
Oh, I think I'm way off, because I was like, is it that he was like a foreshadowing of their sacrifice? I don't know. Like, because I know you said, dang, what did you say that caught my attention? I can't even remember now. I'm sorry. But yeah, like like Sister Nikki said too, though, a prize, I would say, but
Okay.
also a sacrifice that will set them free forever. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Elder, elder.
Y'all, I think we all got it. We're all saying it. So God wanted to fulfill his covenant promise and deliver his people out of Egypt, deliver Israel out. And he made that covenant agreement with Israel, the people, right? But Jesus came, and Jesus was called out of Egypt, but Jesus is the perfect fulfillment of that. Jesus is not worshiping idols and rebelling to God. Jesus is that perfect fulfillment, embodiment of that, and that prophecy, fulfilling that prophecy, even though we know that there is a greater, and because of him, because of Jesus, there is a greater fulfillment or exodus to come, a greater salvation to come. Because when we look at the second verse, the verse 22, the verse after that, it says, then you shall say, thus says the Lord, Israel is my son, my firstborn. So I say to you, let my son go so that he may serve me. And if you refuse to let him go, behold, I will kill your first son. So he said, so let them go so that way they can serve me. And we know that Christ did that, and he did it to the fullest capacity, beyond what any of the Israelites, what any of us could possibly ever do. He served Christ to the point of laying down his life. So goes back down to the parallel of Jesus's life, reflecting and foreshadowing what we're seeing right here in the Exodus. That's what I'm trying to say. And not to mention the son has the birthright, right? The first son has the birthright of the inheritance, which was given to Jesus, which is to inherit, to be the first fruits, eternal life, and to inherit the entire earth, right? So all right, I'm gonna stop there without going too far. All right, what y'all got? Elder, help me out.
Y'all all pretty much got it. Y'all all pretty much got it and put it on the head. Like you said that it is the fulfillment, it's a foreshadowing of Jesus, because we know that he's the firstborn. He's coming from the tribe of Judah, and he is the heir apparent to the kingdom. So you all said it. There's nothing more to say.
Moses was the deliverer.
Right.
Jesus is the savior.
Right.
Parallel between the two. Moses delivered, Jesus the savior.
Y'all know he always, when he get finished Bible study, be sitting down here. I be trying to ignore him, but he just be steady talking in the background. But I'm gonna let him have that one. I'm gonna let him have that one, because he just
You know better.
he be talking all the time, y'all.
I love it.
One
You know,
day,
don't be messing with my friend. Don't be
we
messing with
gonna
my friend.
listen. Don't be messing with your friend. Look, one day he gonna one day we gonna leave early, and I'm gonna go upstairs and sit in his Bible study.
Sure, come on.
Yeah, right.
Yes, that is good. That is good. Thank y'all for helping Pastor and Elder and all the ladies for helping sum that up, because it is very necessary to mention that, because again, this whole Exodus is a foreshadowing of events that have already been fulfilled, but it's all pointing to Jesus, and still events that are still yet to come. But Jesus is the center of it all, and he is the fulfillment of it all. So we just had to point that out and go back to that. And then again, next week, we'll just pick up where we left off at, and we'll begin and prayerfully, or hopefully wherever the Spirit leads us, but we'll hopefully get through chapter 5 as well. All right, y'all got any comments or anything that y'all want to add, prayer requests, anything before we close out?